Hey guys, so today I'm going to show you how I go about writing and recording a track that sounds like the band Ghost. Ghost is a very special band in my opinion, especially when it comes to like the writing and production. I feel like people kind of overlook how innovative and just crazy they are with that side of things, because in so many ways they're such a throwback. I feel like people just kind of see them as like a vintage sound, but they're actually more modern in a lot of ways than most modern metal bands. But we'll get into all of that later on. So let's just start laying some things down, and I'm going to start with a tempo of 125. A lot of Ghost music is very dancey and very kind of disco influenced, so you know, we just want that kind of vibe. So let's just start with just a kick on each beat, and we'll go with 125 beats per minute. So let's start with 4 bars of that. This is definitely going to be heavy and doomy, but it wouldn't be Ghost if there wasn't a little 70s disco in there. For these drums, I'm just using the Get Good Drums metal kit with a little bit of processing, just some distortion and EQ. Alright, so now we need some guitars. I'm in D standard tuning, that's what Ghost tends to use. So guitar wise, I've got these presets loaded up that I've been working on as a kind of Ghost sound. So we have this crunch left and right, which is kind of a very bright, vintage, crunchy sort of rock sound. And then to kind of smooth that out and give it some power, we have what I've called metal, but it's not that heavy. And again, those are just on the left and right. So overall, here's the sound we've got. So we've basically got the bright high-end crunch from those crunch tracks, and then a bit of kind of more low-mid power, which together just gives us a really nice, very 70s, very like Deep Purple, Black Sabbath kind of rock sound. One thing I've learned from trying to emulate Ghost sound is that as tempting as it is to turn that distortion right up, the power is all in the bass and the drums in Ghost, like almost all of the power. The guitars are just kind of a little sprinkle on top of that, so that's why it doesn't sound too heavy right now. I'm basically just leaving space for the other instruments to be way more intense. So let's lay down something that really leans into the disco feel while introducing some kind of doomy notes. Right, and I'm just going to copy this across. We're not quad tracking. Maybe we'll do some quad tracking later on. Alright, so what we have here is basically a nice balance between the dancey and the disco-y kind of pop vibes of Ghost and the sinister, evil minor seconds, minor 6. This is basically how they write. Just write like a nice little disco riff and just inject some dissonant intervals and it will sound pretty much like Ghost. So let's basically have that intro as like a quick teaser, and then we'll basically just keep the same thing going, but we'll just make it heavy and add some like power chords rather than single notes. So then we'll double that on the right and just add a couple of harmony notes. For those guitars, I'm using the 14 amp binaural DSP and this Mercurial plugin for the Tube Screamer. Other than that, it's just pretty much EQ and a little bit of reverb for atmosphere. Let's lay down some bass. So this is technically 4 different bass sounds, and it's just my Ghost sound I've been working on, but we essentially have a kind of very simple, almost a DI. Nothing to say about that. And then we have 3 similar distorted sounds that are just like a huge kind of Black Sabbath bass sound. That may not sound huge if you're listening through a phone, but if you turn that up through headphones, it's brutal. And the thing with Ghost is their bass is absolutely huge, like huger than any other heavy band. I cannot emphasize that enough. They have ridiculous, like they're the only rock band that I would say have like modern hip hop levels of bass, but their bass sound is the kind of bass sound that it's not like Tool or, you know, Deftones or something where the bass sound is very forward in the mix and kind of jumps out at you. It's kind of a background sound that's turned way the fuck up, so you really feel it, but you don't necessarily hear it. So that's the kind of thing I'm going for with this. It's not something that jumps out in your face, but it's very, very powerful and adds a lot of power to the mix, as you will hear as this song develops. So let's lay down some bass, and again, D standard tuning, and we're going to go for something that strikes a good balance between the doominess and the kind of disco grooving away with the kick drum. This is already sounding very Ghost, but we need to make it a lot more Ghost still. So let's add some spooky church organ sounds. So this is just 2 sounds, very simple Cubase sounds, progressive organ, which has a stereo imager and a chorus on it, and then again, same thing on this one. just a church organ. So they're two separate sounds with the chorusing and stereo imaging and it being two different textures. I don't want this to be a thin organ. It needs to cut through all of this guitar and bass and drums. So we want it to really add something and add some atmosphere, some kind of doomy vibes again. So, all right, so we're in the key of D. And let's use two different octaves. So again, we're striking that balance between the straightforward eighth notes to give it that disco groove. The balance there between the eighth note kind of stabby feel to keep running with the beat, keep making it feel more and more dancey and upbeat disco, but then we're also playing really doomy notes in there. So again, just to take the 70s dance vibe even further, let's add a shaker to this. And let's just play around with the volume a little so that there's some feel. You hear what a difference that makes? Honestly, Ghost, most of their songs, you listen carefully, you can always hear the shaker or tambourine or whatever in the background. Listen to that without and then with. Just adds so much movement. So now I'm thinking let's add even more texture because Ghost wouldn't stop here. And something they often do is add church bells. So let's take a look at that. We could even add a choir as well. And the last thing sound effect wise that I'm thinking is maybe like a, you know, a music box, the little wind up things. Like if you want to get creepy, there you fucking go. So we'll go for the octaves again. So now I'm thinking let's emphasize the first beat of each bar when it kicks in with the church bells. So pretty simple. That sound on its own is not very Ghost, but it's quiet in the mix and it just adds some texture. The main one that matters is this. Like that is a church bell. That's actually this free plugin by Spitfire Audio. Awesome bell sounds, and we're going to use that for the choir as well. All right, so we're basically just going to emphasize the start of each bar. Let's just put that on the choir track as well. And we'll stretch these beginning notes out as well. We don't want this to just sound like some little tinkly bells in the background. It wants to be... wants to feel doomy. It wants to feel like a satanic ritual. That choir... it's only quiet, but it adds a little bit of depth and just more ominous feel to this. All right, so the last thing for this section before we start looking at verses and choruses, let's just layer some more drum sounds. This is another trick that Ghosts do a lot that people don't actually know about. I feel like people don't notice that they do this, but their music is not as simple as just 4 dudes or 5 dudes or whatever playing their instruments. They do a lot of this kind of stuff. So all I'm doing there is just layering a crash with the same drum sound. Let's put it up here. But just putting a bunch of reverb on it and filtering it so it doesn't stick out too much. But again, just adds power that you don't really notice. You feel it more than hear it. I'm not done there as well. I'm going to load in some explosion kind of samples. All right, let's try this. This is a sample I made that's a kick drum that basically sounds like an explosion. So let's put it all the way up here. And we'll bring some low end out because the bass and the kick are handling that. We just need the kind of high end information from this, or the mid range. It's a little loud, but that's exactly what I wanted. So let's just put that on the 1 for every bar. See, this is the kind of thing I'm talking about. Ghosts do this stuff in the background to just make it feel larger than life without you really noticing, you know, it's not like Slipknot where you're like, whoa, look at all these instruments. It just sounds like a normal drummer, but somehow sounds bigger. And it's because of little tricks like this. And lastly, I'm going to add a clap because if you hadn't picked up on it yet, we're going for kind of a disco vibe here. So it's not going to be noticeable. It's just going to be in the background, but every beat, clap. It's going to be like Earth, Wind and Fire. There you go. You can't even hear it, but it adds, again, more movement, more of that subtle disco vibe that your brain picks up on. You go, this is dance music, but it just sounds so evil. It's like, how can it be? I just want to jump in, guys, and say if you're enjoying this video, hit the like, subscribe so that you don't miss the next one of these that I do. And if you guys are looking for a producer or anything, hit me up in either my Instagram or email below. I'm always looking for new artists to work with. So with that being said, thanks for watching, guys. Let's keep going. So let's keep a similar feel through the verse, and we'll just simplify the drums a little and keep running with that kind of straightforward rock. Yeah, we're basically just going ZZ Top here. Bam, 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 bam. Does ZZ Top get referenced as a Ghost influence? Because I've just realized they are like the most Ghost sounding band there is. Clean shirt. Alright, so we're going to start with bass on the verse. And something that they do is kind of, I don't know, I would call it like the Billie Jean trick of just straightforward. Instead of going for any kind of syncopation or anything interesting, just locking the fuck in with the kick drum and playing straight eighth notes the whole time. Doesn't always have to be super interesting, especially on bass. It just needs to be something that a vocalist can work with and something that just moves with the drum. Also, this bass sound, these 3 distorted bass sounds are basically using the dark glass for distortion, and this Mark bass amps that I love. The rest is pretty much just EQ to get it sitting in the right place. So again, guitar wise, let's go for something a little more that a vocalist can really work with. The intro, this is very much the guitars like shining and saying, look at me, I'm doing some crazy evil notes and stuff. So let's go a little more pretty, a little more 80s. So again, another common Ghost trick is this, using thirds. You know, harmonies that you don't usually hear in metal. Usually it's just straight power chords or, you know, something nasty. But people did this in the 80s in heavy music, in the 70s a little bit, and then it kind of just stopped. So something I love about Ghost is that they're bringing back these kind of pretty textures. We'll keep the claps going as well. And let's just kind of emphasize this music box in the middle of the verse to keep things interesting. So that just kind of reminds the listener like, oh yeah, we're still in a kind of doomy place. We're just having a disco moment. All right, so in the pre-chorus, this is where we need to shake things up because we've been grooving so straightforward for the whole song. So let's throw in like some toms, some big crashes. So we'll lay down some guitars and yeah, let's just get chaotic. Tension and release, one of the great lessons of songwriting. You hear how that's like, it sounds cool, but it's basically just there to build a ton of tension in the listener's kind of expectation so that when everything comes together again for the chorus after all this chaos, it just feels so good and the listener just wants to hear that chorus. Let's kind of follow that on bass, but put a harmony under it, so we'll play it a fourth lower than the guitar. If I just followed this straight, it would sound like this. But instead, I'm gonna do this. You hear how that adds just such a different feel, just like a whole other dimension to the music. All right, so for the chorus, we basically want to go for the same kind of thing as the main riff, but just with crashes instead of the closed hats. And again, we'll add the claps, we'll add the crashes on the first hits. All right, so for the chorus, we're really just going to go for something simpler before we let that original riff come back in and kind of let the instruments shine more. We're just going to do something that a vocalist can really work with. And let's add some more organ stuff in the chorus here. We'll just go for some slightly more complex chords. And again, that's just to add another dimension to the sound and another kind of atmosphere to everything. So it's not just a straight rock band, but there's kind of more going on. And now quickly, we'll just add some quads in the chorus. Everything's just been double tracked so far, so it will definitely add some more texture to this to have a third and fourth guitar sound. So at this point, we have an intro, a verse, a pre-chorus, a chorus. We can basically take all this stuff and go straight back into that riff. So now we just need a bridge with a quick solo. I mean, it's not really rock and roll if we don't have a solo, right? We've got to bring that energy up a little bit before the final chorus. So that should be everything we need to have an awesome Ghost song. Let's see how this sounds. Thank you so much if you watched this far, guys. If you got anything out of this, hit that subscribe so that you don't miss the next one I do. All right, Ghost. Let's check this out.